So, welcome to the Data Friday. My name is Michael Olschimke. I'm the CEO of Scalefree. We have the session here every Friday, 11 o'clock Central European Standard Time, to allow you, the audience, to ask questions about data vaults, any data-driven question regarding data flows, but also cloud computing, MVP, whatever works for you. Every Friday, all questions are allowed. If we get multiple questions, I would cherry pick essentially. Use the chat here, use the Q&A if you want to raise a live question. You can also raise your hand in English voice. And you can also use the form, which I show you after today's session. I show you the link at least, where you find the form and can pose the questions essentially. It's time box, so we're looking at 10-15 minutes for the answer. And if there will be no questions at all, I will talk about the cluster here, my little hobby project. We're in the basement here of the Olschimke family. But we have a couple of questions at the moment, so I'm not sure if we ever make it again to the cluster. All right, so we received the question. Let me just show it to you guys. Okay, so they essentially, so let's quickly read through this. So they have essentially data, an existing data model, and they have a custom hub where they have some business key for identifying the customers, non-personal, all good. Let's say customer number that they essentially create, and then they assign the customer number to every new customer, fine. And they also have some personal ID, let's say a social security number, or maybe some passport ID, whatever, which is a personal identifiable element, essentially. And in the existing data set, that element is in the satellite as a descriptive attribute, which is fine or great, actually, because then you can separate it from the non-personal data. So you can delete that data independently from each other. And that's what we do, we discuss in the training all the time. So it's just a standard case for now. The problem is they get a new data set now, like this XYZ data set, a smaller one. And this data set has also customer data, which essentially should be loaded into a data warehouse. But the problem is that there's only the personal ID to identify the personal data. There's the customer number is not there, and there's no other attribute that they could use. In the training, we typically say, you know what? The best option is if you want to use a business key which has which is a personal identifiable element, use something else for the hub. Go for another business key because the model will become a bit more complicated. But they don't have that choice. The only choice they have is the personal ID from the data set. That's the identifiable element. Everything else is descriptive, essentially. And the question now is, how do you capture the data now? As an extra challenge, granularity-wise, there might be multiple customers. Remember, the personal ID in the existing model is in the satellite, but there are multiple customers where they have the same personal ID. So there seems to be customer duplicates, essentially. For the same person. Now, let's talk about this. So let me just switch to the whiteboard here. Today's a drawing session. All right. So current model is they have a hub. Oh, I shouldn't use red. Not good. Let's switch colors. Blue. So they have a hub for the customers. And there's a satellite customer, let's call it personal data. And they also have a satellite customer non-personal data, where they store essentially the non-personal data. But here you have the, let's call it PID, person ID. That's where they have it, essentially. And again, there's duplicates. So first of all, we're looking at different granularities, maybe even different semantic meaning. Customer is not equal person, because you might have multiple customer records for one person. There's at least a different granularity issue that you have different granularities here. For that reason, I would create a new hub anyway. You should have only a hub is a distinct list of business keys, but they should identify business objects at the same granularity and the same semantic meaning. So if customer is not equal customer, create two different hubs. And this is a classic example here. Customer is not equal person because they don't have the same granularity, at least, maybe even not the same semantic meaning. And that's why I would create a new hub for person anyway. You have the business key for person now is in the satellite, so, but that's the way it is. So because you didn't know when you created a hub for the customer that the person ID will become a business key eventually, so be it. That's okay. There's a refactoring concept called hub it out. That's another story, but that I would apply here as well to some extent. All right, so that's number one. The next thing is, let me just create a new slide here. So let's discuss the person hub for now. what you want to avoid is, or what people do is, and now let me use red here. What some people try is when they have a hub, where they have a hash key and a business key. And when they realize that the business key is a personal element, so let's say you have A, B, C, hash keys 1, 2, 3, 2, 3, 3, 4. When they realize the business key is a personal element, they essentially try to get rid of this business key from this hub. And they also realize there's a satellite attached, so you can't just delete the line. That wouldn't work, because then you would have essentially a satellite describing a non-existing hash key. So that option they quickly identified that doesn't work. So what they try is they scramble out or randomize whatever the business key out of the hub, but they keep the hash key. That's not a viable solution. I'm not a lawyer here, but that's, let's say, my opinion, because the problem is, even if you decide, because you watch this YouTube video or you went to our training, you realize that you should not use, let's say, a insecure hash algorithm for this purpose. You go for, let's say, SHA 384, the next security standard, to make it super safe. I can break it. The problem is, you should not use the hash key for security purposes in the data model, because the hash key will not add any security here to the data model, not at all. Matter of fact, it doesn't matter which hash function you use. MD5, which is insecure, completely insecure. SHA1, which is also considered insecure these days. SHA2, which is the current security standard, or the next security standard, SHA3. Doesn't matter which one you use, I can break it. The problem is that the security of the hash key is not depending on the number of potential outcomes, 2 to the power of, let's say you're using SHA 384, so 2 to the power of 384 potential outcomes. That's the minimum size for a rainbow table if you want to brute force the way to break the system essentially here. The problem is that's not defining security of the hash key. The hash key is actually defined, the security of the hash key is actually defined by the number of potential inputs, and that's limited in your case. Because in your case, same for us at Scalefree, you have a definition, a pattern for your business keys. Give an example. Contacts at Scalefree have a C number, C minus, and then 4 or 5 digits these days. And that's a pattern. So if I want to break the hash key computation for contact keys at Scalefree, I would just calculate every potential input, every potential business key once and only once. And that's a very small data set. You're looking at maybe less than 1 million records, actually. So same game here. Here, the input is limited by the pattern of the business key ABC. So what I'm doing is I'm creating, for every potential input, I'm calculating the hash key. And that is limited. I mean, seriously. This data set here, I can calculate in Excel or your favorite spreadsheet application on my laptop while I'm sitting in your meeting. That's a problem. So even with your definition of the business key. So, and then what I'm doing is, when you scrambled out the business key here, well, as long as I have the hash key, I can, and you have to keep that one. Essentially, I'm performing a lookup against my lookup table here, a reverse lookup, and I quickly identify the actual business key, not even a hash key duplicate. The data volume is so low, so small that it's not, you don't think about hash key collisions here. They will not happen. So I immediately know what must be the business key here. So that's not going to work. The alternative now, let me switch back to blue. The alternative now is to essentially create, and we discussed this also in one of our blog articles. If you go for the Scalefree blog, search for GDPR. There's an article called "Still Struggling with GDPR?" ? That will describe the same solution here. The idea now is, and I'm doing this independent from the custom hub that already exists. So I'm creating a hub for person that contains the person ID that you have to use for identifying your person. So be it. Again, this solution is a bit more complicated. So if you have another choice, if you can go for another business key, go for it. Because it would simplify your model. You would end up in a model like this one here. Like this one here, super simple, go for it, right? But you don't have the choice. So you have to use a personal identifiable element for identifying the person. So be it. So we use it for the hub. And then we create a role. So the person can play a role in your business, maybe even multiple roles in the business. Let's simplify this a bit. So I'm creating an artificial person hub for the role. Let's say it's a customer, or it's an injured person. Maybe if you have an insurance company, the blog article talks about that. The person might have two different types of policies, one for car insurance, one for healthcare. So this person plays two different roles in your business. And this hub for the role is using a artificial business key that you just generate using a sequence generator, or what I would use is a UUID version 4 or version 5, because that's based on an SHA-1 hash value. So it gives you some good randomness, essentially. What you want to make sure is the sequence of the records in your artificial hub is independent from the order in the initial load of your personal hub, essentially, right? That's important. And then you link the role to the personal ID, essentially. And then you describe not the person anymore, you describe the role. So you have a satellite for person, non-personal data, a satellite for person, personal data. And when the customer exercises the right to be forgotten, what you do is essentially you get rid of the personal data, remove the link. And when there's no link anymore, that refers back to the personal ID, you have no right to keep that one as well. Well, you remove the data not when the request comes in, but when you really have to delete the data based on the right to be forgotten exercise. But that you might have other reasons why you have to keep the data, essentially legal reasons. So that's the trick. And then given your existing model, because you have the hub customer already and the satellite for the customer with the personal data. Oh, it looks like a smiley. Now it looks like a smiley. We got the person ID here and here, right? So based on that, you would then essentially hub the business key out. So you realize now that the existing model based on customers has a business key in the satellite, which is fine. That's what it is. You would in a best case, well, in this you can keep it like this actually. So you could query it, because you could query from the satellite's PID to the hub's PID and then join everything. That would actually work. But it's not a nice model. To improve the model, you would then hub out the business key in the customer satellite by modifying your loading procedures and loading the hub for person also from the existing data source, because apparently there's a hub involved, a link involved between those two hubs, and maybe an effectivity satellite. So the customer is then assigned that's data from the existing system here, right? It's white screen, is assigned essentially to the hub person. The hub person would be also loaded from both systems now. That's why I have two lines around the hub. And yeah, most probably there would be an effectivity satellite because the person ID is in the satellite, so it might be changed, right? So you want to know from when to when the PID described the customer. That's now in the satellite, in the effectivity satellite. And what else? Yeah, that's it. I think. Yeah, that's the hub out. Yeah. And the cool thing is, those entities, the link, the effectivity satellite, but also the hub person, we can derive from the existing customer-based model. That's the hub it out strategy. You essentially select a distinct list of all the PIDs from the satellite here. That's the initial load for the hub. Then you select the relationship between the hub and its satellite. That gives you the link relationship here. And the effectivity satellite you can populate from the satellite down here, roughly. So that's the refactoring strategy that you should apply if you want to turn this into a nice or good model, essentially, or a better model than just a valid one. All right, cool. That's so yeah, my recommendation to wrap it up is essentially to create a new, let me just find my slide again, is to create a new hub for the person, because looking at different granularities, person is not equal to customer. And you would essentially create a bit more complicated model, because where you introduce a role hub with artificial business keys, link them to the personal ID, because you want to make sure you can physically delete data later on. And you want to be able to delete the person ID as well later on, independent from the non-personal data. And then you would follow a refactoring strategy called hub it out, where you essentially hub the business key out of the satellite, essentially, and adjust the loading procedures for your existing model as well. That's the basic idea. All right, good question though. If you have a question like this, use this URL here for going for the form, sfr.ee/dbfriday. That's where you can type in your question, essentially, upload some pictures if you want. There's also other webinars. So we have this Data World Friday every Friday, but there's also webinars on Warescape and DBT. So you want to check out this URL down here, scalefree.to/webinars. That's where you find the links to the other webinars that we do. And there will be more and more over time. And the other thing is, there's a conference upcoming for the, so Scalefree is organizing the Data Dreamland in October at least, so not every October, I'm not sure, but we plan to have this every year, and this time it's again in October, so apparently most probably every October, doesn't matter. So on October 10 and 11 in Hanover, Germany, that's where we essentially are, and essentially join us here. It's only on site, so there's no remote joining possible this year. All on site. Would be nice if you would join to shake hands for real. All right, cool. And I will be at the Worldwide Data Vault Consortium next week, so that's also another chance to shake hands in Vermont, USA. Okay, cool. Then, yeah, have a nice weekend. Good question, guys. See you next Friday. Thank you.
Thanks for joining today. If you'd like to discuss this further, give us a call on the number below here, and we're happy to discuss this with you. See you next time. Have a nice weekend. Bye-bye.